So sunscreen has two broad categories. One is physical sunscreen, which we'll leave for a second, we won't talk about until we're done this part. And the other category is chemical sunscreens. It is the chemical sunscreens that's of concern in terms of increasing people's rate of developing skin cancer. Okay, so first of all, the reason why UV ray exposure increases somebody's risk of developing skin cancer, whether you're fair-skinned or dark-skinned, is because UV rays they're very high in energy, and when they come into contact with the cells of your body, it's a pro-oxidant, and it causes free radical production, which then lead to cancer development. So how chemical sunscreens work is that they contain chemicals that would allow the UV ray to react with it, so then it prevents so by the time the UV rays already reacted with the chemical in the sunscreen, by the time it hits the skin, it's already lost its pro-oxidant activity. So theoretically, it makes perfect sense. If something is active and it reacts as one thing, by the time it comes into contact with the second thing won't be affected, right? It makes sense. However, what's being forgotten momentarily is that when the UV rays react with the chemicals found in the sunscreen, it still causes free radicals, except the free radicals are not produced in the skin cells, produced in the sunscreen. But where does it go? If it's sitting on top of your skin, if the free radicals are small enough, or even the chemicals found in the sunscreen small enough, it will penetrate into the skin. Along with the free radicals, it can still cause skin cancer. So that's the problem that we don't really think about. So just so that you're aware, when you go out to purchase a sunscreen, you need to be aware of the following things. You need to always look at the ingredient list and look at the active ingredients. And if it's anything that sounds like the following, then it would be considered a chemical sunscreen. It's one that you want to avoid. So they include benzophenones, cinnamates, salicylates, and avobenzone. I can't mention any trade names here, but one of the major sunscreen companies fairly recently, I think in the last couple of years, came up with a new ingredient that helps the sunscreen to be stable. Because, again, I can't mention any company names, but sunscreen, regular sunscreen, chemical sunscreen, they do break down over time under the sun. And they came up with a new product that helps to stabilize these chemicals, but that chemical that's added into the sunscreen to stabilize the rest of the chemicals is a carcinogen in itself. So be aware of that. And one other major thing with chemical type of sunscreen is that some of these chemicals, not only are they carcinogenic because of the mechanism that we just talked about, but also some of them have estrogenic effects, meaning if it gets absorbed into the skin, it'll predispose your body to developing certain cancers that are affected by too much estrogen, like breast cancer and uterine cancer. And of course, just as a general thing to remember, it could cause it's not just skin cancer that you should be concerned about. Once these chemicals are absorbed into your skin, it also gets into your bloodstream. So if it's a carcinogen, it could cause any sort of cancer, including things like liver cancer, like lung cancer, like even colon cancer, things that you wouldn't think to relate to anything to do with sunscreens or UV rays, but that's what happens. Again, there's another new chemical that they are starting to incorporate into. They've introduced to the North American market, which has been in the European market for about 10 years now. It's, I can't tell you the trade name, but the chemical name is Mexerol. It's found in 2 major department store cosmetics, and Mexerol itself is considered a safe sunscreen because the mechanism through which it works is this. Instead of being oxidized and producing free radicals, Mexerol, what it does is it undergoes, under the exposure of UV rays, what happens is it undergoes what's called photoisomerization, which means when it reacts with UV rays, it actually produces heat. So that's safe, right? However, because Mexerol is an acid, if you put that on top of skin directly, it'll cause irritation. So they have to add another chemical to it to buffer it so that the pH is a little more comfortable on the skin. the chemical they add to that is called TEA, or if you want the long form of the name, it's triethanolamine. Triethanolamine itself is the skin irritant in people that are sensitive, and also in animal studies they found that in mice it actually causes tumors. So the take-home message is if you decide to buy a chemical sunscreen, you're always putting yourself at risk, even though you think that you're protecting your skin because of the way that these chemicals work. So what are your options then, of course, is your obvious question. You should protect your skin from prolonged UV exposure, but you can't always wear long sleeve shirts, and you can't always stay indoors outside of hours of the day where UV index is highest, depending on your profession, right? If you're a construction worker, you can't just say, I'm not going to go to work today because UV index is high. So this is what you're going to do. You're going to still need a sunscreen. What you're going to do is you're going to buy a sunscreen with its active ingredient being either titanium dioxide or zinc oxide. If you are someone who does work outdoors for long hours, like a construction worker, you want to choose zinc oxide, because zinc oxide is actually a complete sunscreen compared to titanium dioxide. And what I mean by that is it blocks out both UVA and UVB rays. And just so that you know, if you're not convinced, know that depending on the specific chemical active ingredient in your sunscreen, if you decide to go with a chemical sunscreen that is, not all of them cover both UV ray and UVA and UVB rays. So you need to be aware of that. And also remember that even in the full spectrum, chemical sunscreens, they don't always necessarily cover all of UVA and UVB. And if it's not a full spectrum you're purchasing, it's usually one that blocks out UVB rays and a little bit of UVA. So the rule of thumb to follow is if say the SPF is 15, what it means is you are able to stay out in the sun 15 times longer than you normally would without the sunscreen. The amount of UVA rate that it blocks out is 5% at best to 10% of the UVB ray coverage. So it's important to remember all these. The advantage of titanium dioxide and zinc oxide types of sunscreens is they're categorized as being physical sunscreens, meaning that titanium dioxide itself or zinc oxide itself don't actually react with UV rays. What it does is because it leaves a slightly whitish film on the skin, it reflects off the sunlight. And the molecules in both cases, even though the names sound a little bit daunting maybe, neither titanium dioxide or zinc oxide are actually absorbed into the skin. So you don't run the risk of having it affecting your health. And plus, both of these are chemically inert compounds. They don't actually cause anything, even if you ingested it. Just so that you know, pudding actually contains, vanilla pudding contains titanium dioxide and many other things you're not aware of. And one thing to remember is not all sunscreens that say the active ingredient is titanium dioxide or zinc oxide are safe. Remember the ones that are, if it says it's nano titanium dioxide or nano zinc oxide, then it's not. Nano means 10 to the negative 9. In other words, it just means they've made the molecule extremely small, so your skin can actually absorb it. These types of ingredients are found in sunscreens that are the spray form, not the rub-on kind, so be aware of that. Oh. Just because you buy a bottle of sunscreen that's labeled organic and natural doesn't necessarily mean that it's completely safe. There are brands, again, I can't mention any names, there are brands out there that are supposedly natural and safe. They actually contain chemical ingredients. So always read the list of ingredients and look for, what are they? Titanium dioxide and zinc oxide. Okay, anything that you can't pronounce, it's probably a good idea not to have it. So the list of things, a lot of them are common sense that you need to do in order to protect yourself from skin cancer development, is you want to minimize sun exposure between the hours of 11 a.m. and 3 p.m. because that's the time that the sun is most directly shining on wherever you are. The thing that, if you don't remember the time, this is what you're going to remember. If you stand underneath the sun, and your shadow is shorter than you are, then it's not a good time. And at 12 o'clock noon, that's the worst, because at 12 o'clock, the sun is right above your head, there's no shadow. So that's the most dangerous time. And you should always wear sunscreen if you're outside. Depending on your skin type, if you are somebody who is more sensitive or more prone to getting sunburns, you should always wear sunscreen when you go outside, especially in the summer, and choose a physical sunblock as opposed to a chemical one. And remember, even if you're going skiing in the middle of winter, we don't think about sunburns or UV ray exposure, skin cancer, any of that. But in the winter, there is still a risk. You can still get a sunburn if you don't protect yourself properly. And in the worst case scenario, increase your risk of skin cancer. You should, if you can, wear light colored, long sleeved clothing. It's not always possible, certainly not in Toronto these days, but try to strive for that. And always wear sunglasses that filter out 100% of UV rays. It's not really to protect the skin around your eyes, it's really to protect your retina from being damaged by the UV rays as well. And remember this, like this similar logic with when you go out skiing. Just because it's cloudy outside, it doesn't mean that you're safe from UV rays. Clouds don't block out UV rays the way ozone layer blocks out what it should block out. And always remember, just because there's no sun over your head doesn't mean that you're safe from UV ray exposure. Because if you're facing the water or cement or sand, even if you have a big brim hat on, the reflection off of those surfaces can damage your skin as well. So wear a hat, wear sunscreen, and last but not least, you need to make sure that your immune system is kept at its optimal level, because even if you take all those precautions, if your immune system is low, you're still exposed. You're still prone to developing all sorts of diseases, including skin cancer. And one last thing, if you're unsure, with all of your cosmetics, including sunscreen, lotions, and creams, there is a website you should consult. It's the Environmental Working Group's website. It is www.ewg.org. Go on there and check to see whether or not your product is safe. It has a rating on it. It's pretty self-explanatory. Good luck and take care.